Thank you for joining me on this Sunday morning. This is Josh. It's severe weather. I'm a meteorologist in the Raleigh area. And unfortunately, we're in for another rough day of severe weather. It was pretty busy last night across the southern plains. Today, the area shifts eastward and grows, and the risk for stronger storms, including major wind damage and tornadoes and large hail, is unfortunately going to be upon us here as our next storm system moves east. There's also a wintry side of this storm that I'm going to talk about here. Tomorrow, the risk shifts to the east and the southeast, and we do now have an enhanced risk, 3 out of 5 for severe weather as well. I'm going to talk a lot about the details behind the timing of these storms, what you can expect, what our greatest risks are, and then we're also going to take a look at winter weather. And then, unfortunately, more active weather coming next week that we do need to talk about here later in the video as well. So I appreciate you joining me. If you have not subscribed yet, I encourage you to do so. My goal is to get back on here. If this weather gets worse tonight, I may actually have a second video, maybe. I don't want to promise that to you. It just depends on what we can do here. But certainly we'll be updating things as the week wears on. So I'm going to share my screen with you all, walk you through what's going on here, and talk about first what we are seeing on the on the storm docket here for this morning. And lots of rough weather overnight last night. We did have some pretty nasty weather down in the DFW area with wind gusts that were beyond 60 miles per hour and some pretty big hail as well. We did have a severe thunderstorm watch earlier in the day today. That has since been allowed to expire over southwestern Missouri, but more weather on the way here. As we take a look at the satellite image from Tropical Tidbits, you can see we've got yet another quick moving piece of energy that is moving across the south central states and one behind it over California. So still a very active pattern here with multiple waves moving across the country. We really only get a couple days in between these, unfortunately, and that means we need to remain on our toes. We've had rough weather in Texas, in the deep south. Florida, you are going to see some active weather today. So this is not associated with the big storm in the central U.S., but it is something that we're going to be talking about here as well. Here's a look at the current radar from NOAA Weather, and you can see right now nothing of great concern. We're kind of to the point where things have kind of waned, but that will eventually change as the afternoon wears on. We're going to see rain and storms expanding from Missouri up to the north and east. We'll have to watch for some severe weather this afternoon in Illinois, Indiana, maybe even Michigan and Ohio. And then on the southern end, when the sun comes out and when our next piece of energy moves through, we are likely to see supercell type storms down in here that do give us a greater risk for severe weather and damaging tornadoes. Here's a look at current temperatures, and you can see why I'm concerned about such a big area. There's a massive warm sector. In fact, if you're in Chicago, it's in the 60s. Now, Milwaukee is on the other side of the front where it's in the upper 30s, so a lot of drama right there on that front. But you can see the warm sector makes its way all the way up to almost the Illinois-Wisconsin border in southern Michigan. And interestingly, Erie, Pennsylvania was 70 yesterday at this time. Now we're down to 41. The front is actually scooted back in the other direction, but it is going to lift back to the north and east, and we do have that potential for severe weather later tonight into the day tomorrow as well. You can see, though, much of the country is at or above average, with the exception of northern New England and the north central states. And we do have winter weather expected in both of these regions. And we're going to talk about that a little bit more in the video here as well. These are the current hazards from the National Weather Service and winter advisories, warnings, even ice storm warnings here in the grape purple across northern Wisconsin, UP of Michigan, and northern lower Michigan, as well as parts of upstate New York and southern and central Vermont. The area in pink is a winter storm warning. We're going to see ice in both areas, but the winter storm warning area will also have more snow with it. That includes the western UP, the eastern UP, and northwestern portions of Wisconsin, also across parts of New Hampshire and Vermont. And then this area here in the more lavender purple is winter weather advisory, where we do have winter storm conditions, but not quite as extreme as the areas in pink. We also see another storm moving into the west. California has a winter storm warning over the higher elevations. Wind advisories extend out ahead of this system from Oregon all the way into New Mexico. That, of course, is going to create some fire hazards over parts of New Mexico, southern Colorado, and southwestern Texas. And you know, it's feast or famine here. This area has really not seen a lot of precipitation recently, unfortunately, whereas we go over to Texas and Louisiana, Mississippi, and it's wet. And we do have a flood watch here in the green over southeast Louisiana, southern Mississippi. We also have a dense fog advisory down along the western Gulf Coast here from southeast Texas into south central Louisiana. Here is a look at what we're concerned about here later today, and I'm going to share that screen with you here. This is not going to be a repeat of 2 weeks ago where we have all kinds of strong tornadoes, but there is a very big area that is going to see amount of wind damage with it. There's certainly a risk for tornadoes. You can see the area that is hatched in red here, which extends roughly just to the east of Jonesboro, Arkansas, over to about Louisville and Covington, Kentucky, and then as far east as Murfreesboro in Tennessee and even northwest Alabama. This area does have the risk for a stronger tornado. We're probably not going to see 30 strong tornadoes, but we may see a few. I do think we could see several tornadoes, though, in this area. The area that is hatched in green is likely to see large hail as well, especially earlier in this event here this afternoon and early evening. And that goes all the way up close to Chicagoland in northwestern Indiana and all the way down to Shreveport and into northeastern Texas. These will most likely be in the afternoon hours before we have a bigger line of storms that plows through the area and moves south and east. And the area that's in the orange is in the enhanced risk to see those damaging winds. And unfortunately, I think this could lead to a lot of power outages here later in the evening in Ohio and in Kentucky, Middle Tennessee, moving farther south into Mississippi, Louisiana, and Alabama. A lot of that's going to happen after dark tonight. There will be what we call supercell type storms that pop up for a few hours earlier in the afternoon, or not early in the afternoon, but maybe late afternoon, early evening. So earlier in this event. And then that gets overtaken by a quickly moving, what we call bow echo, a line of storms that's going to quickly move south and east, probably at about 60 to 70 miles per hour. So that area, all in the enhanced risk, has almost 30 million Americans: Indianapolis, Columbus, Memphis, Nashville, and St. Louis. And don't ignore it if you're in the yellow either. Detroit, all the way up to near Buffalo, southwestern Ontario, and then all the way down to DFW and Jackson and Alexandria, Louisiana, and East Tennessee overnight tonight, West Virginia as well. 40 million Americans in that area. So the slight and above is about 70 million Americans. Then we have 25 million Americans on top of that in a marginal risk, including a lot of Florida here. And we're going to see some rough weather moving into parts of the West as well. So the thing that concerns me the most with this certainly is the threat for stronger tornadoes. This will probably happen between about 4 and 8 o'clock tonight, maybe a little bit later, farther to the east. And we've got almost 10 million people that are at risk of seeing a stronger tornado, including Memphis, Tennessee, Nashville, Louisville, Evansville, and Clarksville. But anybody here in this area does have that potential to see a few tornadoes. Hail is going to be a big issue as well, especially late afternoon, early evening. Indiana, Illinois, all the way down into northwest Louisiana. We've got over 7 million Americans at risk of seeing significant hail. And then my cover graphic highlights the fact that this is actually going to be a very big wind maker. Lots of power outages are expected, with 17 million Americans having a 45% or greater risk of seeing damaging winds. Some of those could be significant early on, but at least 60-mile-per-hour wind. So Cincinnati, you're in this area, Indianapolis, Evansville, southern Illinois, southeastern Missouri, eastern Arkansas. Little Rock is in this area. Even northern ports of Mississippi, including Oxford and Tupelo and Tunica, and all the way to the east to just west of, right around Nashville, Tennessee, it looks like. So the time frame for most of that wind damage is actually going to be tonight. So from about 5, 6 o'clock on until maybe midnight or even later. And we see that risk continuing overnight. Now, if you're in Florida, you do have a risk for some severe weather as well, especially this afternoon. And that gets all the way down close to South Florida here, Central Florida in particular, the East Coast here, and far southeastern Georgia has that risk for severe weather. Tomorrow, we have more severe weather in the picture, and the Storm Prediction Center has upgraded our area of severe weather to enhanced over much of the southeast here, from Alabama and northern Florida straight up into Virginia, including most of the Carolinas. We have a slight risk for severe weather all the way up into the capital region of New York State, just to the west of New York City, tri-state area, including central PA, eastern West Virginia, East Tennessee in the morning, all the way down to the Gulf Coast here of southeastern Louisiana. And if you're in Florida, the northern part of the state will have a risk for some severe weather. The southern half, probably not so much during the day tomorrow. And at this point, there will be a few tornadoes. There's a 10% risk, maybe a strong tornado, although the chance is greater this afternoon, evening than it will be tomorrow. But you can see a lot of folks in that area, almost 30 million, are at risk of a 10% chance for a tornado. But the enhanced risk is more aimed at the potential for damaging wind gusts, especially in the Sand Hills, Pinehurst area, North Carolina, on down through much of South Carolina, Atlanta, Georgia, Macon, Columbus, Warner Robins, Montgomery, Birmingham, Alabama, all the way down to about Tallahassee and Demopolis here, under that 30% risk of seeing damaging winds. Charlotte is in that area. Raleigh, Durham is almost in that area, very close to that area. So we need to be on the lookout for that. And we do have a risk for hail as well, all the way down into Louisiana. The same areas are all at risk of seeing that. So do want to show you what the computer models are showing for the machine learning, and the area likely to get hit hardest is centered on northeastern Arkansas once again, which unfortunately I'm sure brings back memories to the 14th and 15th here of March. But these cycles often repeat themselves this time of the year, and April is going to be busy as well. So we need to be on the lookout for large hail, damaging wind, and certainly a few tornadoes in here as well. Looking at tomorrow, the risk for severe weather, of course, shifts to the east and to the south, centered mostly on Georgia and South Carolina, but gets all the way up into parts of the northeast. In fact, we could see some damaging winds all the way up into the St. Lawrence Valley of Canada here by the time we get towards the evening hours of tomorrow. Here's a look at the European model just for the next week or so. We're not going to get too far in advance, but you're going to see how busy things are. Low pressure in Iowa this morning is going to move into Michigan and then across eastern portions of Canada. There's a lot of cold air on the northwest side of this, a lot of wind with it, so a dumping of wet snow. But obviously the concern for a lot of us is going to be the severe weather in the warm sector, because that warm sector is going to be massive. Texas and Florida all the way up to Michigan and New York State here by this evening. This is 4 or 5 o'clock tonight. You can see here where the heavier cells are, and they're moving pretty quickly. So this is all going to very quickly move along. We're going to see it weaken somewhat, but there'll still be some severe weather possible in the morning tomorrow, mainly in Louisiana, Mississippi, and Alabama. But then as we see some heating here in the east of I-95, in particular east of I-85, we do likely see more lines of storms that we're going to be dealing with in the afternoon and then in the evening as well in the southeast. Finally, that system clears the coast. We can catch our breath for a few minutes, and then we've got another one coming out Tuesday into Wednesday across the plains. This one also has the potential for some nasty hail and wind with it, also heavy snow on the north side. And this one, unfortunately, the wind fields are actually stronger with them. So I think if we're going to be talking about a day to chase tornadoes, this is going to be the day to do it, Wednesday afternoon and evening down south. We do likely see potentially some very nasty storms out of this, some strong tornadoes with them. And that front doesn't get too far south. It runs into a ridge of high pressure centered east of Florida. So we are going to also have the concern for multiple storms going over the same areas, causing some flooding and multiple waves of severe weather here through the end of next week and possibly even next weekend as well. This time next week, we could be talking about the same areas likely to see severe weather. You can kind of see that here over parts of the southeast next Sunday. So the pattern does break for a little bit here. It gets chillier around the 7th and 8th of April, but we've got to get through the next 8 days before we can wish for some of that cooler weather. Here's a look at the NAM model in the shorter term, satellite and radar from Tropical Tidbits. You can see how things are going to evolve this morning. You can see where our low pressure area is circulating here. Heavy snow to the north, heavy ice as well, just north of the warm front. So it's going to be in the 60s in parts of Michigan, and then you get 50 miles north of there, and we're talking freezing rain and sleet, which is really nasty setup today. But unfortunately, that's how some of these spring systems will often work. You can see it's going to be active for a while this afternoon in Florida. We're also going to have some rain moving through areas that need it in the Carolinas. That will help out with the wildfire situation. Now, the lightning won't, but the rain certainly will. And I do think we see less lightning out of this than what's coming tomorrow. But then we see the area that gets into explosive storm development here over the central United States this evening. And this is going to race eastward here and southeastward. And tomorrow will weaken some early in the day and then redevelop here later on in the day. In fact, you could see maybe some heavy storms in the southeast as we get to tomorrow night. Here's the next one. It's not that far behind, unfortunately. We can see things are going to start to get going here later on Tuesday in the warm sector. And, of course, we're going to have more snow and maybe a little bit of freezing rain in parts of the Dakotas while the west continues to turn cooler and wetter here over the coming days. So let's take a look here at the ingredients in place for today's severe weather outbreak. This is CAPE, Convective Available Potential Energy. This is storm fuel. And you can see it's not super high this morning, but it does start to climb this afternoon. This is about 1 o'clock this afternoon Central Time to Eastern, and the numbers are climbing pretty significantly. And when you have large amounts of CAPE like this, over 4,000 joules per kilogram, we also have the concern to see a few tornadoes as the winds begin to turn in the atmosphere. And certainly very unstable air, which can create large hail. When you see this red line on this what we call skew-T, the sounding, drop off like this, that means the air is very quickly rising and buoyant and very unstable. So when we get that kind of fuel in place, we can see some massive hail in some of these areas once storms do get going here. Eventually, it turns into a wind threat as we lose the Cape, but we continue to have the stronger winds aloft through the nighttime hours. And fortunately, tomorrow is going to be a lot quieter across this area. Tuesday's not too bad, but then we start to see an increase here coming into the middle of next week. Here's a look at the ingredients in place with wind shear for significant tornadoes. And this is the area we've got to start watching more closely this afternoon. We can see the numbers beginning to come up here. This is 4 o'clock Central this afternoon on the NAM model. And take a look at Arkansas and southern Illinois and western Tennessee here as we get to about dusk tonight. These numbers are quite high, unfortunately, not as high as 2 weeks ago, but still very high. And if you pull up a model sounding, it indicates the potential that there will be a few very strong tornadoes. PDS stands for particularly dangerous situation. Now, it's a forecast, and I would not get carried away with picking out one spot on the map and saying it's definitely happening there, but you can see that potential certainly does exist. We've been watching that for a few days now, and as this moves on overnight, there will still be a risk for some tornadoes during the overnight hours, sneaking into Alabama and southern Tennessee, possibly even northwestern Georgia. So while a lot of us are sleeping, make sure you've got ways to receive these warnings, as we will be dealing with destructive lines of storms, some of which could have embedded tornadoes within them. And we're talking 5, 6 o'clock in the morning here, right before folks are getting ready for work. The threat tomorrow shifts south and east. I'm going to move over and show you that here in just a moment. But I do want to show you updraft helicity. And this is the max updraft helicity, not max velocity, but max helicity. Although I think he's a great guy. And you can see here, things are going to ramp up pretty quickly here later today in the Ozarks region, Arkansas, over into Illinois. Lots of updraft rotation here. So we're likely to see supercell type storms and then a line of storms that moves quickly off to the south and east. Here is a look at what the expected radar is going to look like. I switched to the HER model from the NAM. A few storms this morning and early afternoon, but as we get later into the day, 3, 4 o'clock, we are likely going to see some supercell storms developing in Arkansas, maybe even all the way down into the Arklatex area near Texarkana. And these could have some very big hail with them, some intense winds, and probably a few tornadoes as well. These storms are going to congeal into a more linear mode, meaning we've got a line of storms rather than individual storms that have tornadoes with them. We now see a line where there will be embedded tornadoes. But unfortunately, we can't really clear the state of Arkansas out until we get later into the overnight hours. So we're going to see probably 2 to 3 waves of storms rolling through here and then moving into Tennessee. I am going to take you to other states here. I apologize in advance for the length of this video, but I think it's important to kind of take a look at some specifics here. Rain and showers this morning, and then we start to see more intense systems, more intense thunderstorms developing in this system here as we get into the later afternoon hours. There could certainly be some tornadoes out ahead of this line here, Indiana, over into parts of Kentucky, and then eventually overnight, we see more of a linear formation here of storms here, this line that could certainly produce widespread wind damage. But also you can see there's some strong wind shear in the lower levels, which means there will be the risk for a few tornadoes as well. I do think later into the night, we are less likely to see strong tornadoes, more likely to see strong winds. Either is bad. Don't get me wrong. If you get a 100-mile-an-hour tornado or an 80-mile-per-hour wind gust, it's still going to cause damage. But obviously, we need to be on our toes here overnight tonight as these storms continue to push through the region. I am going to take you north first, then we'll go east. Let's take a look at Illinois and Indiana and eastern Missouri. And this area is going to see some heavier cells this morning, but the worst of the weather starts around early to mid-afternoon around St. Louis. And then that extends north and east here. It may get up to Lafayette and Indianapolis and Muncie and Bloomington here towards evening. And then even all the way up into lower Michigan, near Jackson and Lansing here later in the afternoon, early in the evening. Western Ohio, Cincinnati could get hit pretty hard here around sunset tonight. So we need to be watching these. And I'm not going to pull up every city and pull up every model sounding. I think that we'd be here all day if we tried to do that. But you all get a kind of an idea of what the timing of this looks like. Looking farther north into Michigan, I know some of you have been asking about that. We could see some hailers here this afternoon, mid-afternoon. Just to the south of where we're dealing with freezing rain. Then we see another batch of showers and storms early this evening moving across the state. I do think we could see some hail and strong winds And I would not rule out a tornado or two out of some of these here. Probably not a strong one, but something we need to watch. And then fortunately, the weather does quiet down fairly quickly. So this is going to be a pretty quick threat for severe weather. Let's take you down into Alabama and Mississippi here. We are going to see most of this coming in overnight tonight. We could see a few stronger storms in the afternoon, but I think primarily later this evening in Mississippi and northeast Louisiana. And then, unfortunately, while a lot of us are sleeping overnight, there will be that risk for damaging winds, heavy rain as well, and certainly a few tornadoes across this area. If we pull up a sounding here from near Tuscaloosa during the overnight hours, you will see there's a pretty strong amount of wind shear in the lower part of the atmosphere. Winds go from southerly up to southwesterly in the first kilometer of the atmosphere, meaning we do have that risk for a few tornadoes overnight tonight. Tomorrow, these storms are going to move away pretty quickly. We could see some additional development. At this point, though, I don't know if there's going to be much left in the atmosphere to really get things going. I think the main event is going to be overnight and first thing tomorrow. I'm going to take you all over to Georgia and South Carolina real quick here, and then we're going to move on to tomorrow. You can see it's going to be wet this afternoon, just scattered showers, maybe a few stronger cells, but nothing like what we're going to see here moving in tomorrow morning, unfortunately. And you can see this line continues to move through, and then more storms could pop up behind it, and we're going to have to watch that as well. There's a wintry side to this storm. We could see roughly up to 19 inches of snow in parts of the UP here, about 8 inches in the Keweenaw, more as we get over across Lake Superior. So a lot of snow expected from this. We also see the threat for significant freezing rain, perhaps closer to an inch around the Mackinac Bridge here, and certainly across the lower UP and heading over towards places like Sault Ste. Marie over here in Ontario. And it's just going to be nasty, unfortunately. All right, so let's look at tomorrow here. And today, still in Florida, we do have quite a bit of instability today and into this evening in Florida, but tomorrow is when the front moves in, and that's when things get a little bit worse. As you can see here, a lot of storm fuel in place across this area, but we don't have the wind field that we have today farther to the north and west. So it's going to be a little bit challenging to figure out who's going to see the worst of it, but I do think this entire area certainly needs to be watching fairly closely. You see the tornado parameters, while not as high as off to the north in Arkansas, Tennessee, they do start to come up here tomorrow in the afternoon over southern Alabama. We start to see this again, Mississippi, southeast Louisiana, and Georgia. And then in the afternoon and early evening across the Carolinas and eastern Georgia, we got to be watching here for this potential for tornadoes. Again, just one model, so we don't want to get too carried away with it. But you can see this is even like after midnight tomorrow night. This tornado risk starts to show back up again here in central Georgia. So something we need to be watching here fairly closely, and I'm going to have more updates on it coming up. I do want to show you where the max helicity is here, and you can kind of see how we time this out. Florida, we are going to see a few cells that could try to rotate, but really the main event is going to be coming in here tomorrow during the morning in northwest Georgia, and then in the afternoon across central Georgia and Alabama, and then stretching into the Carolinas in the evening, believe it or not. So eastern North Carolina, South Carolina, and eastern Georgia could have more severe weather during the overnight for tomorrow night. And then eventually that's going to move out in the morning on Tuesday. Real quick, I'm going to show you all Florida here. I'll learn to talk. But you can see here, we do have a disturbance moving through here later this morning that is going to lead to numerous showers and storms around lunchtime. And then in the afternoon where there's heating, we could see some hail and maybe a brief tornado or water spout somewhere in the warm sector here. So we need to be watching this afternoon. And this threat continues into the evening hours and actually expands all the way down towards Lake Okeechobee and to the south and east of Orlando this evening. So roughly from about 4 o'clock to 10 o'clock tonight, I think is going to be pretty active. And I would not be shocked if we had a severe thunderstorm watch issued for parts of central and east Florida. Tomorrow, we see the next round coming in here, mainly in the panhandle in the morning and midday, but then moving into the northeastern portion of the state. And again, we have to watch out for a few cells that may try to fire up in the warm sector here. I want to take you all farther up the East Coast here real quick, and then we're going to wrap things up. This is a look at today in the Carolinas and Atlanta, Georgia, Augusta, those areas. Tomorrow, then, we have more organized storms moving in from west to east, and then maybe a second wave at night. Moving into the Carolinas here in Virginia. We are going to have some wet weather here this morning, eventually making its way out onto the Piedmont overnight tonight, and then heavier cells moving through eastern Kentucky, West Virginia overnight tonight, and another wave expected to get going here. And this is our actual front. So from East Tennessee up the Appalachians here and then eastward, we're probably going to see 1 to 2 waves of maybe severe storms here later tomorrow afternoon into tomorrow night. Most concerned with this wave that's coming through the Carolinas and Virginia here during the early evening hours from about 4 o'clock near the Triad in Charlotte to about 11 o'clock around Virginia Beach, give or take. And then this moves away to the east. Real quick, I'm going to take you up here into the Mid-Atlantic region, and then we're going to wrap this up for the most part. We'll look at next week. But you can see here, it's going to be some showers around tomorrow morning and afternoon. The more organized storms are coming in the evening hours, and we may get hit hard with some strong winds and maybe even a bit of hail across this area. That includes Delaware and the eastern shore of Maryland, also South Jersey here during the evening hours tomorrow. Real quick, I want to show you the southern portion of New England, including eastern PA. And you can see here the warm front lifts north. So we warm up tomorrow on Long Island. We warm up in New England. In fact, we get quite a bit warmer. And then we get hit hard with some storms here during the late day and into the evening hours as well. And it could just storm itself out during the overnight hours tomorrow night across New England. It could just be a really nasty night of heavy rain here. So that's what we're concerned with. I will share this from the Morehead City office in North Carolina. There is an area that they're more concerned with to see tornadoes and severe weather from 5 p.m. to 2 a.m. tomorrow. Or really, this would be Tuesday morning. And it includes Greenville, Kinston, Goldsboro, Wilson, Rocky Mount, Williamston, down to Jacksonville. There could be a few tornadoes in this area and certainly some strong winds with it. And this will eventually make its way to the Outer Banks and weaken during the overnight hours. Now, after that storm moves out, we get ready for the next one. This is a look at Tuesday here. And we already see the threat for some large hail and maybe some damaging winds across the center of the country here later Tuesday into Tuesday night. Unfortunately, that's not it. This is Wednesday, and this day I think has certainly a high ceiling to it. We could see a major outbreak of damaging winds and tornadoes, 30% chance here. And you can see the machine learning models are actually jumping big time on this, in particular in the same areas that are going to get it here this afternoon, evening. We definitely have to be on our toes Wednesday afternoon and Wednesday night across much of the same locations. As we look ahead, the worst of it does shift southward here for Thursday, but we still have a risk for severe weather, and the Storm Prediction Center has that area highlighted in a 15% chance. We're not done, unfortunately. As we get to Friday and Friday night, we still have active weather across this area. Even next weekend, we still have a chance for potential severe weather on Saturday, and believe it or not, farther south on Sunday as well. So that's all I've got for you all on this forecast. Appreciate your time today. I do want to end this forecast with a word of encouragement, and I want to honor and glorify God and Jesus Christ, because without God, I don't think I would have the strength to be able to do this. This is a tiring industry, especially this time of year and then hurricane season. But the good news is that the Lord has given us Jesus Christ to basically give us the strength we need to move on. Isaiah 40:31 says, "But those who wait on the Lord shall renew their strength. They shall mount up with wings like eagles. They shall run and not be weary. They shall walk and not faint." I think for somebody like me who has not been a Christian all my life, my struggle is waiting on the Lord to give me the strength. I want it there now. I want it now. We all want things now, but we have to wait on the Lord. The Lord does give us strength, but these things are mysterious. But we shall walk in faith and not faint and not leave it up to chance. So I wanted to just share that good news with you all today, because I know these storms are certainly making themselves known, and they are certainly affecting lots of lives of millions here. But just know that I am in prayer for everybody here that is under the gun from severe weather. I pray for everybody that comes here. I don't think you came to Josh's severe weather by chance. I truly believe God brought you here today. If you don't believe that, you're still welcome here. I'm not going to judge you on your beliefs, because trust me, I've been there. But I do welcome you here, and I encourage you to come back here. And if you do have a prayer request, I will spend some time in prayer for you today. Everybody be safe, and we'll be back soon. God bless you.